Hi, I'm Representative Al Baldessaro, and we're back again with Who's Looking Out for You, with my great co-host, Representative Janine Notter.
All right.
How in the hell are you, Janine?
Oh, I'm just great. How are you, Al?
Hey, you know the question's coming up
The
there,
question's coming,
because
yes.
you motivate the heck out of me with your running there, because I can't do it no more.
Well, let's see. I'm up to 1,193 miles for the year to date.
Yeah.
But
Did you run this morning?
I did, but only 5 miles.
5 miles, that's all?
Yeah, yeah, but you know what? It went by fast because I thought I was at 2.5 miles, and I ran in the house to get a drink, and I looked at my my app, and it said I was at 3.5. So
Wow.
I don't know where that mile
Well,
went,
you know,
but I'll take it.
There's a lot of women in Londonderry that run, and you are a mentor by just putting this out to other women that watch this show here in my town or other towns here.
Keep running.
So that's why it's a great thing to bring that up there to show physical fitness is a beautiful thing. We got a special guest here today, came a long way.
One of
I
our
think from-
colleagues.
Oh, yeah, from Franklin, I heard. You want to introduce him?
Sure, he's Representative Werner Horn. Welcome, Werner.
Welcome to Londonderry.
Al?
It's a long reach.
Yeah. So, how many terms have you on now?
So I just finished out my second term, so I'm running for my second re-election, and I
Well, your third
really
term.
am super excited about what I've been able to accomplish in just 4 years. For me, it's about engaging in the community and understanding the special circumstances in a community as opposed to just keeping a seat warm, being a nameless vote.
Well, I was impressed with you going up there on one of the things we worked on on the death penalty. You know, you went up and you gave him hell on the floor there, and you gave a great speech on that.
So I
Yeah,
appreciate
I
that.
was standing with you on the sidelines, and I just assumed we were on opposite sides. So I was pleasantly surprised when you said, "No, I'm for it."
Yeah, no, you did a great job on that speech there, and I'm a true believer, and you know, you kill any. Of course, I would rather have the death penalty for everyone.
Well, I'm
You know, an eye for an
for
eye,
the
a tooth
worst,
for a
worst
tooth.
for the worst is the way
Yeah.
I see it, and also for me, it's like a starting point. So when you've got a criminal that's holding things back,
Right.
and well, we'll take death penalty off the table if you tell us where you hid the child or whatever.
So you're running on your third term. So what are the big issues that you're taking on or that you've accomplished you were talking about?
Well, related to the conversation around the death penalty issue, when I came into my second term, I submitted legislation to move child killers onto the list of capital crimes. That's the bill
believe I was
you
a
helped me
co-sponsor,
co-sponsor. Exactly. And I had no idea how big the issue actually was in New Hampshire because I ended up getting called by a couple of media outlets and giving an interview to New Hampshire Public Radio. And the concern I had was the appropriateness of the punishment. When you kill a child, you're cutting off forever all of those things that you and I have lived through. You know, so that victim can never be going to a high school dance. That victim can never fall in love for the first time.
Amen.
All of these wonderful things that have happened to us are forever closed off because somebody had the lack of character, the lack of restraint, and murdered a child. So I felt it was appropriate for them to be on the list of capital crimes. Capital crimes being reserved for heinous acts, among other things, slaying of a person who has dedicated their life to protecting our society, slaying a law enforcement officer. And I was a little saddened and shocked when the House voted so overwhelmingly to knock my bill down. I think the vote ended up being something like 305 to 45.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Wasn't that?
really, really
Wow.
one-sided.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of the same arguments that we used for the death penalty repeal bill, I used 2 years earlier. The fact that you're not mandating somebody be sent to the death penalty, you're not proposing it as a fiscal solution, you're not suggesting by advocating the death penalty that we have a perfect justice system. What you're doing is you're saying quite clearly, when you murder a child, that is an option. And it helps the family with closure. I have a neighbor of mine who lost her nephew, wasn't even a year old.
That little blonde boy.
Yes, she
They were
came
at
and
the hearing.
testified. She came and testified before criminal justice, and
He was a baby. It was
Yes.
very hard. It was very
raped,
difficult.
raped and murdered. His
Wow.
name was Sean Sylvester. Sean
A
Sylvester.
year old. Wow.
Less than. And he was murdered by somebody his mother was dating. So,
It's always the mother's
I remember
boyfriend.
that,
All
yeah.
those stories, it's always the mother's boyfriend.
but the clear thing was everybody wanted to object because what if the justice system makes a mistake? Well, the solution to that is fix the justice system. Don't not put a child killer to death. You know, it costs so much money. Really? I'm pretty sure that we prioritize money as we see fit in the legislature. We have an
money that
$11
kid
billion
lost.
budget biannually. So it's a question of, do we prioritize the event rather than, you know,
How do you put a dollar sign on the victim,
Exactly.
on that young child?
exactly.
You know what I mean?
So you're not
yeah.
making fiscal decisions, you're not making judgments on the justice system. You're simply saying this person has earned the opportunity to be put to death by
Right.
killing a child.
No,
So-
I'm going to play devil's advocate here because there was a woman there at that hearing who was accused of killing her own son. And I think she did have to do time in jail. And it was very difficult for her to clear her name. Do you remember her?
I
And-
remember her exactly.
and
She was
I-
a young woman from Mississippi, and she had a 9-year-old son who died. And if anything, she is a great example of the sustainability of our justice system because she had the opportunity to appeal. It wasn't as if she was put to death right after the first guilty
Right.
verdict was returned. And through her appeal, she was able to get
the
the
system
medical
worked.
examiner to reopen the evidence on the circumstances surrounding her son's death, and they ruled it a death by natural causes.
See, you just said it, and that's what
Yeah,
you
the
said.
system
Because
worked.
at the hearing, I went over and talked to you. I said, Matt, hearing that lady's story, that I started changing my mind, and you said no, the system worked. It proved that she was
You know, with
innocent.
today's technology, DNA and everything else that we have, it's unbelievable. Do you know under Bill O'Brien, you remember the Mount Vernon home invasion?
I do.
Okay, we pushed the second year when that happened.
I was
we
a
couldn't do
co-sponsor of
anything.
that
Yeah,
bill.
You were involved. We pushed it. We got that passed. Okay, for the death penalty. And what we did
This
was
is a slight
the Governor
expansion.
Lynch wouldn't sign it, but he knew it was veto override. We had it, so he just let it go without a signature.
Oh, that's how it passed. All right.
Yeah.
'Cause my husband works with Dave Cates, so right after the murder, and he travels all the time, so he ended up doing both their travels, so he was gone for like months. And then what would have been Kim's birthday, she was a year and a month older than I am, we went to their house. They had a big bonfire because she had cleaned up their yard and put all the sticks in big piles, and so they did that in her memory. But I walked through that house and I saw how far the daughter had to crawl. And it was incredible. So, she was near death herself, and she
Right.
had to crawl through this long ranch house. It was a
Are
very
they still
long
living in the
house.
house?
Yeah, oh, they have
Yeah.
a guard dog, yes. They have a
Yeah,
very mean
wow.
guard dog.
Yeah. I mean, we're on board with you with the death penalty. So what else you've been doing up at the State House for the last?
Well, the circumstances surrounding the shooting in Florida in February have really highlighted for me the need for appropriate mental health. The idea that you have somebody who is so deep into crisis that they start thinking that taking another life is appropriate. It should be a massive red flag. It should be a massive signal that somebody needs help. And so I started asking questions in New Hampshire, what kind of mental health resources are available? And what are the constraints on not having enough mental health of being available? Is it one of those things where we just don't spend money in the right places, so it's a matter of prioritizing state funding? Or is it a shortage of people willing to do the job? So you could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the warm bodies there to support mental health the way it needs to be supported in New Hampshire, then you're going to be in trouble. So far what I've been able to discover is that we don't address it seriously enough. We had one of the country's best mental health situations back, I believe, in the early 80s. We were recognized nationwide for it. And we had a bed that was 2,000 or so. We had a facility that was 2,000 or so beds. Currently, we have less than 200 beds.
Really?
We
That's
closed
at
the
the
state.
Concord Hospital, right?
We closed the state hospital.
He's right.
And one of the facilities, one of the strategies we're using in New Hampshire currently is to house, and I want to say house specifically because these people haven't been convicted of anything, but we house severely mentally ill patients in the state prison psychiatric ward. Now, if you have a relative in the state prison psychiatric ward because they're very sick, okay, and they could pose a danger to themselves or others, you are treated as if that person is a criminal when you even try and visit them. So far from being relieved that your relative is getting compassionate care, you feel like almost a criminal yourself because of all of the things, all of the criteria you have to fulfill just to visit that relative. So I don't believe it's an appropriate placement for somebody who's significantly ill to put them in the state prison system. And the number of beds that we have, less than 200 in the state hospital, isn't adequate. I've seen anecdotal evidence surrounding young adults being housed in emergency rooms for extended periods of time. And those emergency rooms aren't set up for long-term care. They're set up to triage people who are in emergency need.
So you're basically looking for funding to fund a contract with more beds. Has nothing to do with guns or anything like that. You're just looking to be able to...
I'm looking to address the mental health issue specifically.
It's like, well,
Okay,
what's
but
the
not
underlying
guns.
cause? Why are there so many people that are mentally ill? What's causing it? Is it the chemicals in the food? Or who knows?
If I knew that answer, then I could not only fund my race completely, but probably most of the house.
Well, you know what in my opinion, we've drugged children, today's society, from a young age.
Yeah.
I remember one of my boys in California, they wanted to put him on Ritalin because he was hyper. Okay, and I refused. My son's got a degree. You know, today he's doing TV shows, live PD.
And they can't
You know
get
what I
into
mean?
the military
Right,
if they've
we
been
can't
on
get in the
Ritalin.
military, and we're ruining these children's lives. And I don't know, and there's some of these psychopathic drugs are suicidal, you know, these drugs. So, you know, hopefully that they take a look
And,
at
you
that
know, and a
also.
lot of those drugs for depression, they make you gain weight. I mean, and people gain hundreds of pounds. I'm like, so how does that help you be happy? I think that makes things worse.
Yeah, so I mean, so you're more for, it has nothing to do, because I thought I heard you say guns, you know, because of what happened down in Florida.
Nope.
Which, I mean, you know, okay, good, that's probably what popped in my head, because that was a shooting with the mental health issues in Florida we're talking about.
Yep, the word guns
Right.
never came out of my
No,
mouth.
I know, but
Yeah.
it did, it came to my brain there, because that's what that was about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So at that point you're talking about scale. And I've said this before. When you come to the decision to take a human life, everything else is just about scale. Because even if you accomplish that with a knife that you got from the school cafeteria, so you
Right.
bypass the metal detectors,
Right,
you
yeah.
bypass all of those other restraints, you get one from the cafeteria, and if you only murder one student, the parents of that student are not going to be relieved that it was only one person who died because they didn't have access to a gun. It's about scale
Right.
at that point.
Yes.
They still killed somebody, and that still represents a person in crisis.
And you-
And I think that we need to address the person in crisis
Yes.
rather than make laws that, quite honestly, A, don't work, B, end up handicapping millions of people, and weaken our Constitution. I
Right.
mean, I hate to scale up like that, but at the end of the day, when you tell a law-abiding citizen that there are restraints on what they can do under the Second Amendment, you're weakening the Second Amendment.
That's right.
Do you know our former Congressman Frank Ginta?
I've heard the name before.
Because mental health was one of his priorities. And he was mayor when they brought back the Manchester Marathon. And I don't know what the charity is this year, but I know in some of the earlier races the charity was for mental health. So what else is a priority for you?
Well, I hesitate to get into it because I'm very aware that Al and I are on separate sides of this
Uh-oh.
issue.
No, we can talk
Okay.
about the education funding. I mean,
He's
I know
read
exact-
my mind.
I know
He
exactly
knows
what
me
it
better
is.
than I know myself.
But see, you're in a district here, just so you know, that we pay for our education, top dollar. We're almost at $16,000 per child here in Londonderry. You look at our schools, you look at our gym. We do a great job in our education.
You have a nice
You're in a
facility
city
here, this school.
with a cap, so I want people to understand that when we start discussing education. That's not Londonderry's fault that you have a cap. That's not Merrimack. That's our position, but go ahead.
So I want to make one simple point. Under Article 83 of the New Hampshire Constitution, it identifies education as being a critical aspect to a productive society. And that labels, it leads the state, it leaves the state as responsible for an adequate education of their citizenry. Now, when the state legislature adjusted the adequate education formula in 2012, they said that $3,600 is adequate. Well, actually, the $3,600 is the most recent number. Whatever it was in 2012, I'm not familiar. But regardless, as of 2015, $3,600 was considered adequate education for each student in New Hampshire. That's about 25% of what New Hampshire is spending to educate their student populace. So if I gave you 25% of your car, you wouldn't think that's adequate. If I gave you 25% of the normal calories a human being is supposed to consume a day, you wouldn't consider that adequate. So I struggle with the idea that the legislature considers $3,600 a student as adequate for educating them to the point where they would graduate from high school with all of the skills needed to take a job.
Why does it have to cost that much per student? That's what where's
Well,
the money
no,
going?
It's not so much the 3,600, because if you understand the adequacy of funding for the formula, there's $3,600 per child through the SWEP, statewide education property tax. Now, who is giving up that money? The taxpayers.
Every property owner,
The taxpayers.
well, specifically every property owner,
Right.
because you can live
Every
in New Hampshire but
right.
be renting.
That's
It's okay,
why
but the
so
taxpayers.
our taxes are so high. Our property taxes,
Property
outrageous.
owners, business owners, okay, are all paying this tax. Now, that's coming from there. So if we raise that, that means we raise property taxes. New Hampshire legislators are about local control. If you want a fancy gymnasium, you pay for it. If you want to put in more teachers, you pay for that, not the whole state.
And I appreciate that you make that point, because here's what I would say. $3,600 is 25%. So even
right.
doubling that to 50%, okay, you're still way below what every community in New Hampshire is paying to educate a child.
Right.
How about,
okay?
are you looking at charter schools though? Charter schools spend a fraction of what the regular public schools spend,
Right.
and they do a better job.
And they score higher on the testing.
So I want to be clear before I go further in this conversation.
Right.
I am completely an advocate for educational opportunities appropriate to the student. Okay? So charter schools are being underfunded under the RSAs consistently. They have never
But look
been
what they're
fully
doing. Look at the results
they've
that they're
never been
Right.
fully
beating-
funded
beating the
since
odds.
the law was passed.
Right. But look at the results.
And
That's the
the
word.
results are accomplished by not operating under the same criteria that our public education system has to.
Well, they are public schools, but
Couple of different things to that, but those are important distinctions though, because not all of their staff have to be certified. Only 51% of their staff have to be certified, unlike our public schools, which require 100% certification.
but
What are they
whatever they're doing,
right?
it's working.
What are they doing right that
Well,
we're-
homeschoolers, the
we're
parents
not, we're
aren't
not doing in other
certified.
schools?
The other part of the charter schools that we have to consider is the fact that they don't offer benefits on the same scale as the public school districts. So when you start talking about having to pay benefits and honestly providing decent pay, because charter school teachers have some of the lowest pay in New Hampshire, which is saying something since New Hampshire has some of the lowest pay for teachers in the nation.
Right, but the amount of money they're being paid doesn't mean that they're not better teachers or the other way around.
Right.
But if you don't value something, then you don't have a problem with paying people poorly. One of the things that people justify treating retail badly or treating food service badly is they don't get paid a whole lot. If you value something, you pay for it according
Do
to
you
your
want
value of
to
it.
pay a burger flipper $15 an hour?
So the $15 an hour is got its own little rabbit hole we can go down. It centers in New York City, which is where that
In
movement started.
Seattle.
No,
Seattle.
it's centered in New York City.
No, it started, but it's
Right,
in Seattle.
it's
Seattle
Right. They
built
initiated
on the fallacy that New York City created. The reason why we talked about New York City is if you're a burger flipper in Manhattan McDonald's, you're not living in Manhattan. You're probably living half an hour to an hour away from your workplace because nobody can afford to live in Manhattan on $9 an hour.
I don't know if anybody can afford to live in Manhattan making $900 an hour.
Hey, let me
But
ask you something.
the idea is that Seattle didn't look at the economic repercussions
Right,
before
and you
they
know
jumped
what?
on
I
that
know somebody
$15
out
an
there,
hour
and she ended up
bandwagon.
getting her hours cut. She got, oh yay, $15 an
Does-
hour, but now she doesn't have any hours to work.
Does your district in Franklin they don't mind if we double, let's say we double the adequacy there to 7,200 or whatever. Okay, they don't mind us raising their taxes, the property taxes, to get the money?
So there's not a one-to-one correlation with what you're saying, which is part of what I've been
We would
talking
have to
about.
raise taxes,
No, because we have an $11.5 billion budget.
right?
So it's not a reason to raise taxes, because as far as I'm concerned, you don't ask for more tax money if you haven't proven that you can spend the tax money you're being given appropriately. And I don't think the state budget has met that threshold. So I would look at adjusting a state budget with the tax dollars we already get
Who would
before
you
I
cut?
would advocate.
Who would you cut?
That's a great question. And another little rabbit hole we could go down. The university system of New Hampshire, the Durham campus specifically, has built 13 brand new buildings from 1999 to 2015. That is a rate of growth unprecedented in any other aspect of New Hampshire's economy. And we had a massive recession
And they
between,
still built.
and they still built buildings. And these are
Right,
a
yeah.
combination of academic buildings,
Right.
and these are an academic buildings and residential buildings. So I went to UNH. I'm very proud of the fact that I went to UNH. When I was at UNH, I lived in a dorm with sheetrock walls. They just finished a dorm that had cinder block construction. If you go to the campus now, their very latest dorm has granite accenting. The cost per square foot in the new
Waste.
construction is way off the scale
I
compared
don't
to.
have granite countertops.
That $81 million or whatever we're paying in education, not all of it's going to, because some of it's going to the community colleges also.
No,
But
no, that's not true.
Is it the
The-
81
the
that goes to the
$81 million
college?
is specifically to the
Specifically
University System of
UNH.
New Hampshire, University System of New Hampshire. So Durham, Keene,
Right,
Plymouth.
81 million.
But then, yes, but then the community college is a different line item in the budget. If you remember during the budget process,
Mm-hmm.
the governor is very proud of the fact that we raised the amount of money going to the community colleges.
Right.
But we level funded the University System of New
But
Hampshire.
we would need 300 and, don't go,
Okay,
I
while
may be
you're
wrong.
doing that math, the
363
chancellery's
million.
office, do you think they need it?
I'm sorry?
Do you think they need a chancellery's office?
I know 100 employees.
I don't know anything about running a university,
They have
so
like
I couldn't
I
tell
just,
you
I
what
just
the
remember from
chancellery's-
previous terms,
Right.
and we're having this discussion, and
Yeah, they
like,
had like 100 employees the last time we went at this.
they had, like, there was one department,
'Cause
I
we
remember
cut them.
Representative, well, she's former Representative, Honorable Lynette Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
talking about one of the departments where they had like 11 professors and 8 students, or something ridiculous amount like that. They had more
Yeah. I
professors
mean,
than
we
Well,
students.
it's
agree.
not a secret that the university system makes their budget hard to get at.
Yeah, no transparency.
And then,
There's-
and then
there's a
if you
huge
cut their budget,
reluctance for that,
they,
sure.
they don't stop any spending. They don't trim anything except raise the tuition and
Well,
blame it on us.
that's the problem I have by saying with the false narrative of the state legislature is forcing us to raise tuition. The responsibility for managing that institution lies with the board of trustees, and if they're not willing to restrict their expenditures rather, I should say, then their decision to raise tuition rests on them. That is a $1 billion budget. Okay,
Right.
that $81 million represents
Okay.
6 to 8% of their operating budget. So they have a $1 billion budget.
So
But
do you want to
that-
be on the finance committee next term?
But see, the thing is, that's only we would need 3 or 4 times more than 81 million to cover doubling the 3,600
So
throughout the
I
state.
never said that I would advocate doubling.
Mm-hmm.
I was pointing out that even doubling that amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
okay, isn't necessarily the first course of action I would suggest. Because if Londonderry High School, if Londonderry as a community wants to invest in their school district,
Right.
they're
Which we-
welcome
we
to.
do.
They're welcome to. They don't.
Right.
Londonderry
But
doesn't
Franklin
live.
could do this. Your district could do the
Londonderry
same.
doesn't live on what the state gives them alone.
Right. Mm-hmm.
No community lives on what the state
Right.
gives them alone. So I'm not suggesting the state pay for education completely, because, again, an adequate education has to leave that graduate able to get a job. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and if they want to go on to college, that I would argue should
Mm-hmm.
require above average preparation. Or if they want to go into the military
Right.
as an officer, that would be above average preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'm sensitive to is the fact that, and I will be completely transparent about the fact that I know more about Franklin than any of these other communities.
Oh, yeah.
Because
I don't know much about
I went to
Live there.
school in Franklin. I graduated in 1994 from Franklin High School.
I love I think it's a nice city there.
I
Franklin.
substitute teach at Franklin, so I've met the students and I've seen the facilities. My wife has over 14 years of experience teaching in Franklin. So I know Franklin better than I know some of these other schools.
Right.
When you have funding levels from the state in adequacy that equal the amount of dollars being spent in 1994, or just after Claremont,
Yeah, you're right. We haven't raised it in 9 years, the SWEP,
but
you know.
you're talking about funding levels that haven't increased since the early 90s. Has everything else stayed the same?
Right, well,
We have 2
yeah,
minutes
we got
left.
2 minutes. But keep in mind, I mean, it's increased every year in my town. Our school budget's like about
Oh, yeah.
81 million or something like that.
One year they
And
put
I'm
it on our
not-
tax bill, just how
Yeah.
much goes to the school.
And we don't even have as many people as you do. What's your school budget?
14, I believe.
14 what?
Million.
Million? See, that's your school, that's your town issue.
Okay, so we don't have time to get
Yeah.
on the rabbit hole of
Right.
what my community is facing. The fact of the matter is, the state legislature has an obligation under the Constitution to adequately educate every student in New Hampshire,
Right, and I
without
agree,
regard
100%.
to what
Right.
form that education takes. It's a constitutional right. You don't give
Right.
up your constitutional rights. Parents don't give away their child's constitutional rights when they choose to send them to a
Right.
parochial school or the private school or even a charter school.
And,
So
yeah,
what
and
I
they're
would like
still
to
paying
see,
for the public school.
what I would like to see is I would like to see the education adequacy formula adjusted to reflect that reality. And I hope we can agree that
No,
we
I would
owe
love
that
to see
to
it
the
agree,
students
but
of New
remember
Hampshire.
the taxes, everybody, all the property owners are gonna have to pay that,
If,
you know?
are you advocating raising taxes? 'Cause I'm sure
No,
not.
not at all.
No,
Okay,
no,
then.
we signed a pledge.
Oh, okay,
Can't.
then.
Can't.
But the idea is that, can you look me in the eye and say the state is absolutely spending every single tax dollar they get efficiently?
The state, no, not every dollar, no.
Okay,
Not at
so
all.
we are in agreement
Right.
that there are tax dollars that we can use for education purposes.
Find out where we cut and then maybe we'll talk,
Yeah.
where we cut.
4 letters, DHHS.
That's only 81 million, that's a minor, that's a
Oh,
drop
no,
in the bucket.
DHHS budget is larger than
Yeah.
81 million.
Because if you
Isn't it
get
the
more
largest?
money,
It's the largest.
my town deserves more money.
DHHS is larger than 81 million.
We got, how do people get in touch with you, by the way? We got,
My state website carries my cell phone number, my address. I'm responsive to my legislative email. I have a public and political Facebook pages. I shop at Hannaford's.
okay.
So
Well-
if you see me on the streets, stop me and ask me. I owe you that transparency.
Well, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Representative Warren Horn.
Representative Alzar, Representative Notter.
Once again, this is Who's Looking Out for You, and we'll be back with another show coming up. Thank you.